right, it's 27 minutes gone past 7 o'clock, and as I hinted to you earlier, I'm happy to have with me live in the studio former immediate past president of the Senate and an industrial relations consultant, Mr. Chester Humphrey. I like to call him the Honorable Chester Humphrey because he's an honorable guy, and also live all the way from southern France. Is regional pollster Peter Wickham. Good morning, Pete.
Good morning, gentlemen, and good to be with you and the Honorable Chester Humphrey.
Okay.
Yeah, well, same here, Peter. The last program we have been on is where we predicted that the Americans will do exactly what we said we would do. In fact, you would recall that I made the point that the Americans were rescripting the way in which they dealt with the Panamanian situation and General Noriega, and the Americans were scripting because the forces that they assembled was not a force of military occupation. Right, that force of 20,000 soldiers can't do it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah.
All right. So, gentlemen, let us start from the beginning. All right. We all sort of preempted that was going to be the outcome of what would happen in Venezuela. We were hoping against hope that it wouldn't happen. We hoped that, diplomacy and so forth would have worked. Regional leaders were talking about keeping the region as a zone of peace. Well, the eviction, if you want to call it that, occurred with not much violence, so there wasn't any delving too much away from the peaceful nature that we have. But what are your take on what happened on that fateful Saturday morning?
First of all, Innocent, let me thank you for being on the program. This is the first time I've been on your program. We did have an engagement before, but the marriage never took place.
Okay.
And let me be clear. I am one who pays particular attention to language. Right, so there was no eviction in Venezuela on the early mornings of Saturday.
Okay.
Right, and eviction means that you are occupying a position. Like if I'm evicted from a home, it would suggest that I have no legal right there. I'm being removed from my home. What has happened here is a straight modern day kidnapping of a president. So I want to be very precise with my language here, lest we confuse people. And this is why I never use the term African enslavement. Right? African slavery. There was no African slavery. There was European slavery of Africans. Okay. So I like to be very precise in the term. So there's no eviction here. There has been a kidnap of a legitimate president, and it's amazing when I listen to the interview of the press conference of President Trump. Now, this is the head of America speaking. Right? First, we were told that Maduro lost the elections, and he was an illegitimate president. And then the Europeans crowned one Maria Corina Machado, and they said, well, she won the election. Yes? No. The Venezuelan courts did not find in favor of Machado. Right? In the same way as the American courts did not find in favor of Trump when Trump claimed that Biden stole the elections, right? But it is good for America because the courts found that everything was square with Biden, and the world and the American narrative has accepted that. But when it comes to Venezuela, they wouldn't accept it. Strange enough and interesting enough, Trump said in that interview following the kidnap of Maduro that the so-called popular Machado is really not popular and can't be placed in Venezuela. So I'm saying this to establish the connectivity in an unfolding dynamic in which the final chapters have not yet been written.
Well, it's not. In my opinion, it's not even started, and it doesn't look good from where I sit. It doesn't look good. Peter, come into the conversation. What are your thoughts? You heard Chet's introduction.
Yeah, I mean, Chester has been very, very clear, and certainly I think Chester, being a child, well, I should say a child, being an adult of the revolution in Grenada, is a lot more familiar with these issues and has a proximity that helps him to speak with greater comfort in relation to American invasion, American imperialism, and all that we're seeing now. And yes, it definitely is Panama all over again. To some extent, it differs from what they did to you guys in Grenada. But the long-term signals, I think, are very, very disturbing. There's a vulgarity and a crassness associated with this operation that wasn't present in many of the others, consistent with the fact that you're dealing with a Donald Trump who tends to be a bit more crass and vulgar than many of his predecessors. So it lacked elegance in terms of an attempt to deal with the public relations of it and say that, it was really about narco-trafficking, that it was, an effort to put the people in a better place and so on. And essentially Donald Trump said this, look, we want to run Venezuela in a way that benefits the United States of America. We have substantial interests there that have to get their money back. Are we going to deal with it in that way? And I think that is what differs from a lot of these previous actions that we're seeing, in that we don't have to guess or wonder. He basically is telling you. When you telescope that to the rest of the region, I am very, very concerned, because I am already hearing suggestions being made that he was not alone and that he had the benefit of other Caribbean leaders. So, of course, my friends in Trinidad and Tobago are anxious to start saying who is who, across the region, and point fingers at people that may have been beneficiaries of Maduro's generosity, and to suggest that they are part of that cabal, and that they should be taken down next. And I find it sick, quite frankly, because, there's another side of this thing that people are not understanding. You are essentially saying that you have this international policeman that can walk around and lock up people in any country and, completely ignore UN charters and agreements and international law, and just go and pick up people based on their own evidence that they believe they have of someone committing wrongdoing. And in all of this, there is a complete refusal to acknowledge that you have indictments against one Benjamin Netanyahu and one Vladimir Putin. Why is there no attempt to pick up these people? I mean, but Netanyahu apparently went to a party at Mar-a-Lago over the weekend. Why isn't this person being dragged before a court who has done far more vile things than anything that Maduro could possibly have done? Why there's no attempt to invade Russia and take out Putin? If you're that interested in restoring democracy to one of the powerhouses of the world, why not do that? But yet still, there's this attempt to say that you can encroach on the sovereignty of states that you consider weaker. Some time ago, he was very clear in his reference about these asshole states, and that presumably determines what he is to do. So the question is, where do we go next? My expectations is that he has set his sights on Guatemala. Maybe that will be another place. Honduras Colombia is a source of concern for him as well, and perhaps he will look there. My question is Mexico safe in this environment? Perhaps he needs to take out the leadership of Mexico as well. And then I also look at Greenland. And my question is, the Greenlanders have been told that their country is needed for American security, and perhaps he ought to take out that. Because if he's right to do what he's doing in Venezuela, then perhaps he should go elsewhere. He can go to Canada.
Peter, let me just interject.
The leadership of Canada.
Peter, let me interject here with a question, both you and Chess. Now, is there any world body, we have the UN Charter and all these sort of things, that can really intervene and say to the U.S. government that this is wrong and we are going to reverse it? Because he has to face indictment today Okay. Now, is there a supreme institution that can intervene on behalf of law and order? Because from all indications, I mean, it's wrong. I listened to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and he's saying that we are not going to allow certain people to be within our neighborhood. Now, to me, this, I don't know.
Well, look, let's be clear on one thing. Well, certainly for people like myself, this is nothing new. We are in a phase where the mask has been removed. There is no fundamental difference between Trump and Biden. All right? They are just different sides of the same coin. Look at what America has aided and abetted. We saw a live stream of what genocide looks like. So we had a modern-day Holocaust committed by Israel. The International Criminal Court has charged Netanyahu and others with this crime. What did the Americans do? The Americans attacked the court. They placed restrictions on the judge who issued the warrants. And as far as they are concerned, Netanyahu is okay. He has done nothing wrong. When the whole world can see, even up to now, Trump is on the international television saying Netanyahu has fulfilled every aspect of the so-called ceasefire, and the only person who has not done so is Hamas. And we can see children are freezing. We can see on the live television, it's not hidden in the pages of a book. We see it every day. So let's be clear. We have held these countries on a kind of pedestal. We say the most democratic, they are freer. But when was America? I mean, I don't want to get into an ideological discussion. I want to focus on what is happening in our neighborhood. Because what is happening here now is they concoct a story about narco-terrorism, and they have the supplicants in the region now suggesting anyone who had any relationship with Maduro may be part of this narco business and ought to be removed. And it is not new. We remember during this anti-apartheid struggle, you remember a guy called Buthelezi? So inside of the movement for social justice, you find sycophants who pride themselves in being mouthpiece of the mouthpieces. The Americans have made it clear this has had absolutely nothing to do with any narco trade. It has nothing to do with narco trade. It has always to do with America repossessing, and let me make it clear. They claim that Venezuela has found itself economically in the current situation because of what? Corruption. They say nothing about the American complete embargo and isolation, the seizure of the national assets and all the gold reserves of Venezuela that was kept in the Bank of England, right? And all of that pressure. They make no reference to that in respect to the difficulties faced by the Venezuelan people, which forced millions of them to flee. It was the American sanctions that created this. Yet they spin the narrative. And now, of course, and let's be clear, prior to Chavez, prior to Nicolás Maduro, when the Americans had it nice and the corporations were bleeding Venezuela of all of its resources, Venezuela, notwithstanding all of its riches, had the most grinding poverty in Latin America. And that is what the Americans are reimposing. Make no mistake about it, that's what is being reimposed. But as I said to you before, the situation in Venezuela is exceedingly complex. There are a lot of questions that one cannot answer. And bear in mind, the Party Socialista of Maduro is still in power.
Okay.
Right. The head of the armed forces, Vladimir Lopez, he's still head of the armed forces, and Delcy Rodriguez, who was elected in an elections which the West cried out to be unfair. She is now the president, and Trump is now saying that the person who supposedly would have won the elections, not popular. So explain to me in the difference of months, because the elections was held last year, the so-called popular person who would have won the elections and sent in another person and he won, and that Maduro stole the elections. How all of a sudden, within 12 months, she's no longer popular. The fella who's allegedly supposed to have won, no mention about him. So it tells you, and history is replete with this. The American Republic, let's be clear, the American Republic was founded on genocide. When the American Constitution, which they claim is the greatest document in the world, probably greater than that of the Bible or the Quran, when that was written, and they talk about all men being equal, born equal with same inalienable rights, the people who were writing that had slaves.
Okay. Now, so I really want to get back to the question that I've asked. Is there a place that can resolve this apparent wrongdoing?
No, there's not. Because, well, let me say this. The world is going through some tremendous changes. And all Europe has lost its empire status, and that was contracted out to America. But America itself has been seriously challenged. It is no longer the powerhouse. Yes, it's still a very powerful country, right? But it's now being rivaled by new forces that have arisen and is reshaping the international balance of forces in the world. Yes, and America feels itself slipping, and Trump says so. Trump campaigned on the fact that America is slipping. Yes, and with these new forces, new possibilities, we have witnessed the emergence of BRICS. We've seen the rising power of China, and China has risen, has no military bases outside of its country, has not engaged in any military adventures outside of China, has no colonies. China never participated in the slave trade, never accumulated wealth by conquering others, right? And in a country in 75 years, have done what it took the American Republic more than 250 years to do. China has removed out of poverty the largest single block of humanity in all of mankind's civilization's history. And all of that is done within a period of 70 years.
Peter, I want to come to you now. I want to ask, what happened in Venezuela on Saturday? What precedents does it set for example, the war in Ukraine, the pending militarization military activity that is pending between China and Taiwan? Now, how does that action by the U.S. government impact these brewing contentions?
Yeah, but before I get to that, though, I just want to take an opportunity to respond to the previous question about the location that could be used to resolve the issue, and to say that certainly after the First and Second World War, the assumption is that these types of issues will be settled at the United Nations, certainly with the assistance of the Security Council. And it was at the time structured in a way that was intended to ensure, with the victors of the war being the persons that sat around the table at the Security Council, to ensure that this nonsense would not happen again. What we have seen subsequently is an attempt to which the United Nations has been marginalized. I think that the United Nations has been marginalized within with Russia and the Ukraine, certainly by the actions of Russia to protect itself at the Security Council, which is something that the Charter assumes would not happen. And then we've also seen the marginalization of the United Nations with respect to the war in Gaza, where, again, it has been marginalized by the United States using its veto power to essentially prevent anything from happening. So my sense is that conversations like these should happen at the United Nations, where we are encouraged to sit around the table. The problem is that the United Nations requires a rules-based system. It relies on a rules-based system, and it relies on international law being observed or followed. The Trump administration has demonstrated that it has very little regard for that it is America first, America only, and to hell with rules. This puts us in a very, very perilous position, because we developed an institution globally that was supposed to help us respond to these issues. We have found that, yet again, it has been set aside in respect of a United States desire to essentially go and seize oil in Venezuela. So I think that there's some dark days ahead, because we really don't have any resolution really, or anything that you can look to. And the other point that you made, as far as Ukraine is concerned, I don't know that America has the moral authority to say anything to Russia, quite frankly. I mean, Russia has claimed that it has a territorial right to that land based on history. And they're moving in that direction essentially to secure it. But the point is that as much as I think that they're wrong and for doing what they're doing, I don't know that this action helps to give President Trump any moral authority to speak to Putin in that regard, because he has essentially thrown international law to the wind as well, and perhaps Putin would claim that he has every right to do the same thing. And then you also mentioned China and Taiwan, which is an interesting scenario where China seems to be, for the time being, anxious to play games and demonstrate his power, but hasn't been willing to exercise it. But certainly, if they were to exercise that power again, there's really nothing that you can say to them, because you've effectively done worse, far worse, in terms of violation, sovereignty, and moving in that direction. So it constrains future conversations that are happening in a real and a significant way in terms of the evolution of a rules-based system within the context of the United Nations. I'm anxious to hear what the Security Council will say today, but my sense is if the Security Council says anything that's negative in respect of the United States of America, the United States will veto that decision, and it will have very little use. The rules-based system requires a willing partner in the Security Council, and if you can't have that as a basis of establishing international law, then we essentially spinning top in mud. But there's another side to it too, which I don't know if we're going to get to today, and this is the economic impact all of this is going to have on the Caribbean. We are going into the winter tourist season, or we are in the winter tourist season. And this thing is extremely disruptive. Grenada, like Barbados, are having a fantastic winter season, which is the basis of our economy. And once you block or you disrupt that flow by virtue of what happened last week and what Trump has said can happen again in the future, there's a discomfort and a hesitance in terms of people wanting to say, let's travel and relax on Grenada's beach and enjoy themselves. And that worries me, because for us it's a lifeline. I mean, the Americans could care less. They are concerned about oil in Venezuela, but we are concerned about the livelihood. And it's fascinating how all of us are being impacted, from Antigua back down to the same Venezuela, and impacted by this action that is taking place in Venezuela, and all of us are being made to suffer as a result. And then that's a short thing, but then we are being told in medium and long term, as Chester said just now, they're looking around for Caribbean leaders to point to and say, look, you are also involved. I always tell people, when Hurricane Maria ravished Antigua, Barbuda, and then it also ravished Barbuda and Dominica. In both instances, the first response to that crisis came from Venezuela. The same Venezuelan Coast Guard with their apparatus, their equipment, both rotary and fixed, were able to establish contact with Dominica, and establish contact with Barbuda. And in situations where the Americans had no time for us, and essentially the Venezuelans responded. And I'm saying that am I to understand that because at that time we took assistance from them, that we are also supporters of this narco regime that is supposed to be a narco regime? It worries me. It worries me that the ALBA, which up until recently was something that was also beneficial, that a participation in that arrangement automatically means that you are to be attacked and taken out of power by President Trump.
No, I think
that is a very serious signal.
By the local lapdogs who are speaking in order to give legitimacy to their conduct. But there are some things unfolding here which is exceedingly worrying. We are just learning that the Antigua government, and subject to correction, this is on the mass wire in the region, that the Antigua government has signed a secret agreement with the United States to accept third-party deportees from other countries. And we know that in Grenada case, this was a request made to this current government that so far has gone unanswered, very much the way in which the Raider thing has gone unanswered. But the fact that we can have a split within CARICOM and one country, because Antigua has brought to an end the medical exchange program that they've had with Cuba, right? The Americans are demanding that this is going to happen because, as far as the Americans concerned, this next train, the train that went to Caracas and kidnapped Maduro, its next stop is Havana. I mean, Rubio has said so, and we now have a very strange sets of developments happening within the region. People who firmly oppose what was initially said, we now find they acquiescing, and we now find there all kinds of secret, unknown agreements. Even the parliaments don't know. But in the wire, this in the last few days has come out. This agreement has been signed by Antigua and the United States that Antigua will accept third-party deportees.
Okay. Gentlemen, I must take a commercial break, and we'll be right back after this. When we get back, I want us to look at the direct implications for the region, because we're hearing the U.S. government saying, well, President Trump said that it's his intent to stay in Venezuela until there's a smooth and transparent transition. So we look at that when we come back. But this is the conversation. I'm speaking with Mr. Chester Humphrey, regional labor consultant and immediate past president of the Senate, and also regional pollster Peter Wickham, all the way in cold southern France. We'll be back after these. Gentlemen, don't you go anywhere. Welcome back, viewers and listeners, to the conversation. It's straight up 8 o'clock, and of course you know by now that we will not go to the BBC this morning because I've got two goodly gentlemen with me in studio, Mr. Chester Humphrey, and via our Zoom platform, Mr. Peter Wickham, all the way from France, I must admit, so taking time off from that busy schedule, that cold temperature out there to join us shows how important this conversation is. Gentlemen, welcome back. What's next for the region? Based on the comments that were made by President Trump himself and also his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, that they are going to stay in Venezuela until such time as they feel comfortable that there's a smooth transition. What's in it for the region? Because despite the impoverished nature of life in the Venezuelan people, as it appears, Venezuela was still supplying and supporting the region via the ALBA and all sort of, other aid and so forth.
Petrocarib. For many years, Venezuela actually financed the school feeding program here in Grenada.
Okay.
For many years.
So what's next for the region?
Well, it's really difficult to predict. Because there's so many twists and turns in these events, and there have not been a clean removal in Venezuela at this point. As I said to you before, the head of the armed forces, Cabello Rondon, Minister of the Interior, is still there. Vladimir Lopez, head of the military, is still there, and Delcy Rodriguez, who was the vice president under Maduro, is still there. Now, I suppose, what do kidnappers do? Kidnappers kidnap you, and then they demand a ransom, and then there's negotiations taking place.
But that in itself is not really regime change, because you're living the same regime. It's just the head of the regime.
Yes, but because it's a kidnap, right, and they have the victim, they're in a position, because remember, the first demand made by Rodriguez was the immediate freedom of Maduro and his wife Celia Flores. This was the first demands that they've made. Lavrov, when he spoke, called for the release of Maduro. Now, we don't know what is happening, and let's make no mistake about it. The recent release of a convicted drug trafficker, the former president of Honduras, do not believe this is something that stands on its own. There's a connectivity between that and what has happened in Venezuela. It's all tied in as a broad part of a strategy. So we don't know. The fact that we know, here are the things we know. That these charges against Maduro are just totally made-up charges, right? And they got a grand jury to indict him, okay? And they did that, I think it was in 2015 or 2020, I believe, is when that occurred. So the plans for this was always put in place, okay? And of course the kidnap that occurred in the early hours of Saturday. So they now have Maduro. He is in a Venezuelan prison. They're now negotiating.
He's in an American prison.
In an American prison, and they are now negotiations back and forth. I mean, forget the theater, forget what we're seeing. A lot is happening in the background. In the meantime, the Socialist Party is still in control. Caracas is quiet and calm, right? There have been no untowards. There have not been any outbursts. They're showing you pictures of Venezuelans celebrating, but that are primarily in Miami, in some Latin American cities, but nothing is happening in Caracas and the other big provinces in Venezuela. Everything is calm. So as you say, they have removed the head, but the organization still remains in office. The army is still there, and we don't know. It's a very fluid situation, and it's difficult to predict. But what we can see, what I can see, from looking at the overall strategy, the Caribbean will be whipped in line. We will be whipped to become silent. We will be whipped to become blind. And in other words, our sovereignty is significantly under threat. And the first signs of that crack seems to have been occurring in Antigua. Right, the first signs of that crack. And therefore, the role of this drug thing that you're hearing now emanating where primarily from Trinidad. I think one of the dailies in Trinidad are the one that carry this story, that other Caribbean leaders, so it's you can see a plan that's unfolding. First, they went after us with breaking the links with Cuba in respect of the Cuban medical mission, without setting up any alternatives for us, hold your tail. Then they are picking up large numbers of our people, and of course forceful deportation. Then they are demanding these small islands with small populations to accept deportees. Where we are going to put these people? Where are we going to get the resource? the scarce tax dollars that we have, that we can hardly meet the needs of our people, we now have to go and provide security, and talking about we're going to have the ability to monitor. What utter nonsense we are talking about. America would not deport highly technical people. They need them for the scientific research and functioning, especially as the competition with China intensifies. And what that competition has proven, that the Americans are not capable of stopping China's technological advance. They're not capable of doing it. The Chinese are way ahead in many, many areas and fields. The Americans are falling behind. And what is happening now is a naked use of power. Note that the countries that possess nuclear weapons had to be treated in a particularly different way. America is not messing with North Korea. America is not going to mess with Russia. As a fact, they want to do a deal with Russia. It is all Europe, and America is coming into conflict. Modern America in this period is now in conflict with all Europe, because the designs of all Europe was to balkanize Russia, steal its resources to give them a breath of continuance as dominant powers in the world. That has not happened. Right? The coming of Putin had put an end to those hopes. Right? And what is happening now? In every major field of economic competition, for example, the German car industry is now on the ropes, taken over by the Chinese production. And the Chinese are not investing in military. The military investment is to protect themselves. Never again will China go through in its civilization the period of humiliation when the British and the French and even the Americans and so on took parts of China. Never again would that happen. So, but China does not have an expansionist military role. And let's be clear on Taiwan. If Karakou broke away from Grenada and set up itself, does that mean, and declare independence, does that mean it's not part of Grenada? It's still part of Grenada. Taiwan is a natural part. And this artificial creation that there's some struggle. But you see, the people of the Orient think differently. They think long term. They think long term. I mean, what China has been able to do in 70 years, and to move the country from a poor, impoverished nation, poorer than most Caribbean countries in 70 years, is mind-blowing. And they have done that without going to war. So while America is fighting wars all over the place, China is just simply investing in its productive capacity, in its scientific research, etc., etc. And today, China has outstripped Europe. It has outstripped Europe. It is the only non-white, Mongoloids is the only non-white group of people. And then India is at its heels. After India had suffered years of rape and exploitation by Britain, India is now on the rise. So that the sources of power are changing in the world, and it's not going towards the traditional old colonialists. New forces are arising, right?
New kids are on the block. Peter, I want to ask you this. Just around midday today, Maduro and his wife will be brought to New York court, Manhattan court. What can we expect from this court trial? If there is it going to come to a trial? Do you think there's substantive evidence that will, convict Maduro of narco-terrorism?
Yeah. I mean, if we use the case of Noriega as an example, of course, I mean, it's a stretch that the court should consider the process by which he was brought before legitimate. It clearly is not. But at the same time, I appreciate that it's an American court in United States of America with an American president, and that court would certainly have to do what it would expect the White House to do. So I don't expect any salvation from the American court in respect of international law and its respect for international law. What my expectation is that, Maduro ultimately will go before a jury of his peers, which is ironic because it will be an American jury. And we have to see what they think. And certainly if there's a hope that the jury is not convinced that the dots are connected in the way that Trump is suggesting that they were. But I don't have any expectation that anything dramatic is going to happen today. Apparently, the judge before whom he will appear is a judge that has already spoken to these issues in a very clear way. So, spoken to similar issues in a fairly clear way. So, I expect that he will be held over, and the challenge continues. I don't know if I necessarily agree with Chester that there's a back channel negotiation that can lead to anything, or I think what Chester is saying is a back channel negotiation, not necessarily that it will lead to anything, and I am not optimistic there either. I am more anxious to hear what the United Kingdom, Canada, say at the Security Council. I'm fairly sure that it will be denounced by Russia, it will be denounced by China. So, I'm anxious to hear what the others say in respect of this matter, and I'm concerned that they may either, withhold. Of course, the United States of America is gonna veto anything that comes negatively, but certainly Canada and the United Kingdom may very well take a position that says, that we will abstain, which to me is disturbing because you're legitimizing the process almost by saying that you don't object to it.
I'd be shocked if that happened. I would be shocked if Britain in particular, because Britain has been the international lapdog of U.S. policy wherever, and I don't see them, given the fact that they have been able to get away with a very mild set of sanctions, mild sets of tariff arrangements, and given the fact that the British government now, the Labour government, is in deep trouble in the in the UK, I don't see the UK abstaining in a vote like that. They will all go along with the United States.
Well, it was said this morning, Keir Starmer was saying that in as much as he would like to, the British would like to adhere to the rule of law, but he's not going to mourn and shed no tears over the removal of dictator Nicolás Maduro. So what does that say?
Well, what Chester is saying is right. We shouldn't expect anything from him. Look, you know what? One of the things that I am concerned about in all of this is that there's an equivocation on the part of people like the United Kingdom and certainly the United Kingdom, and I think France hasn't even been as clear as one would like, in terms of confusing their views on Maduro, whatever they are, and this idea of respect for international law. And I think that that's something that I fundamentally have a problem with. That you may have, and you're welcome to hold views on Maduro. I mean, certainly when the Tiananmen Square massacre occurred, many of us had views in relation to Beijing. But at the same time, it does not essentially mean that all rules of international law are to be abandoned and you're going and take the person out. And I'm concerned when I heard Keir Starmer speaking in that way. I said to myself, but look, you can't confuse, because ultimately this is what Putin was saying initially. He's going to save Russians in Ukraine. And in every instance, one cannot say, look, there's a particular person I have a problem with, and I have a basis on which to take that person out. And bear in mind, ultimately in Grenada, that's what happened. Where people felt, the thing, you take out court, and the day after is the concern. When you take these kinds of actions and you don't have a clear plan for what happens the day after, it must cause confusion, and that's the reason that we have the problems that we have in Afghanistan and Iraq, and and it continues and continues.
Let's just go back very quickly before callers come in and take this question here. The British and all of these countries, old Europe, are all part of this grand scheme. Do not forget, when the British government seized the sovereign funds of gold reserves in the Bank of England, Venezuela went before the British courts. The British courts found that the act of the government was unlawful. Have they released the funds? No, they haven't. Britain will want piece of the American action because they have Shell, right? And British multinationals that invest significantly in the oil sector. These guys all act in concert. They may have little falling outs from time to time, but at the end of the day, given the new doctrine enunciated by Trump, all of these guys fall in line.
Okay.
Every single one of them.
We do have a caller online. Let's entertain this caller. Good morning, caller. Welcome.
Yes, well, good morning, Mr. Joseph. Greetings.
Welcome.
All wishes, blessings of health, strength, and wisdom so we can confront whatever may befall us or confront us. They say, listen, Mr. Joseph. Good morning to your guest there, Mr. Humphrey. How are you, Chess?
I'm fine. I'm good.
I'm happy to hear that. Listen, man, I coincide with your thinking, your expressions, and so on. And I'd like to say that I'm quite happy to know that the first day of the year, as well, an active day of the year, that we're into this kind of serious debate on international matters. In this case, we hope to see it continue with local matters too. Venezuela. A couple of things here about Venezuela. You said a couple of things there, Chess, which I put. You see, when you talked about the poverty that existed in Venezuela, when they today talk about the destruction of the economy by Maduro and his gang and whatnot, listen, I was in Venezuela in the 80s, thereabouts, late 80s. People used to eat Purina dog chow. You hear what I'm telling you? I ain't telling you what they say. Mind you, I used to see. They call it Perrarina. Purina dog chow. Nobody can doubt that. So the poverty in Venezuela was induced by the said United States. And by the way, I just want to make this observation. I hear you referring to America and the Americans. I want you to seriously consider my observation. America is a continent. The United States is the constitutional name of that country in the north between Canada and Mexico. Let's get that straight. When you keep stressing, no, I'm not criticizing it destructively. I'm just saying that we giving them strength to their thesis that America is for the Americans. America is not for the United States. America is in fact for the Americans. So I think we shouldn't give them that. There is no nationality American. They are stations. That's what they are because they belong to the United States. Just a suggestion, may consider it or not. What is happening today, brothers and sisters, I want you to reflect from the 1930s, thereabout prior to the so-called Second World War, when Adolf Hitler let loose, defying the Treaty of Versailles. He then entered the Rhineland because he wanted it, quote-unquote, back. Then he went into Austria, the Sudeten land, then on to Poland, and so it went until the Red Army of the Soviet Union began to plunge the daggers into the bowels of the Rhine. This is the time that the world has to unite as one to stop the United States. The United States is a criminal organization, the most deadly and evil terrorist organization in the world. And if the world doesn't come together, and it is time that the Caribbean as a whole, I'm saddened to hear the division within the Caribbean, utterances from this drunken buzzard in Trinidad and Tobago, and otherwise you can go into that. I don't want to steal your thunder. But listen, if the Caribbean doesn't get up and speak as one on this issue, we shall feel the brunt of it, because if they're doing that to bigger countries, you can imagine what will happen to us. Continue the discussion, we'll participate as we go along. Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. Chess?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's right, yeah, but the abridged term of of America is also popular language. So I'm engaging a little bit of popular language there. But coming back to Venezuela itself, the situation is exceedingly complex.
What happens to Venezuela now?
Well, we don't know.
The regime is still the same.
Well, well, let me put it to you. The Nicolás Maduro's government, of which Rodriguez was a vice president, is still in charge.
Is that
the military guys
really in charge?
Well,
or is it a puppet?
It's in charge in Venezuela. Well, we don't know, because remember when Trump made his interview statements from Mar-a-Lago, and he said that they're in touch with her and indicated that she was sworn in as president, and then he released a bomb in which he says Marina Corrado Machado is not popular, because people are saying, well, okay, she was supposed to have the most popular person in Venezuela. She was banned from taking part in the election by the Electoral Court because of her calls for violence, which disqualify her from standing from office. She then chose an individual whom they claim won the election by 70% of the votes. All of a sudden, that has disappeared, and the woman was given by the Europeans the Peace Prize, and she was supposed to be, logically, the person to assume the leadership in Venezuela. But Trump has declared, but she not popular, and to go and put her there. So they are contradicting themselves, and the reason why these contradictions are emerging is because the lies are no longer holding, right? So what have they got to do? They've gone back now, so they've kidnapped Maduro. Rodriguez is now the president. Venezuela has remained calm. There have been no hundreds of thousands of people on the streets. There have been no riots, and there have been no programs yet started hunting down people who support Chavistas and so on, hunting them down. That has not happened, right? So we don't know. There seem to be some discussions unfolding, and as I said, the first demand that Rodriguez made was the release of Maduro and his wife. That's the first demand she made. And she went on to reaffirm that Venezuela's sovereignty will be respected and defended. And when the military chief came to address the crowds that had gathered in Caracas, that is what he said. He said that the sovereignty of our country is sacred, and the military. But as I say, I mean, things are happening at different levels, so we don't know for sure. And for those who are accusing me of going silent and not speaking, I do not speak from the point of view of ignorance. I speak from the point of view of information. And that's why most people like to hear what I have to say. They may not agree with what I'm saying, but what I'm saying is not challengeable on the basis of facts and so on. And so it's a very dynamic situation. We don't know, but I want to say on this program immediately, first of all, we are learning that about 25 Cuban security personnel were killed during the encounter when the Americans were committing the kidnapping.
I was just sent a message yesterday.
I received a note today, didn't have time to read it because I was hustling here, and that note seemed to be an official statement by the Cuban government. I can't reveal what it was because I have not read it, but from the information, it seems that about 25 persons, Cuban security personnel, were killed during the attack, which counters the American stuff that there really was no significant resistance in and around Maduro. And then there's several questions have arisen. How were they able to penetrate? I mean, we in Grenada in a 5-day engagement shot down 5 American helicopters, right? It's mind-boggling. How, and according to Trump and his people, the helicopters which came to do the kidnap flew over the water by 100 feet. That's the height of a telephone pole. How could they have entered Venezuelan shorelines without coming under fire? I mean, there are a whole series of questions and issues that we can't explain. I think we don't have any explanations.
The truth to this, I've really not, because I looked at the news and I was baffled. A place like Venezuela, in the build-up during the bombing of the so-called narco boats and so forth, the military was poised, and to have helicopters, not bombers, bombing sites and so forth, helicopters coming in, and there was no retaliatory strikes.
Yeah, there was no anti-aircraft, no batteries were activated, and I listened to something on a video by an American, and it is clearly disinformation, that the American superior technology used in jamming, man, they have the traditional anti-aircraft guns that in using that is not a computerized system. That's a manual system. You sight an aircraft coming. We had them in Grenada. That's what shut down we didn't have any sophisticated satellite-based munitions and so on in 1983, and yet we were able to shoot down 5 American helicopters. Okay. So I can't understand, and this is what I'm saying. There are a lot of I mean, the thing is perplex, and over time, of course, we would learn, but in the immediate aftermath, it is difficult to see. And therefore, I wouldn't like to go fishing in those waters because, as I say, I don't know. But what is clear is that there are going to be serious reverses in the Caribbean. Already CARICOM is split. And the narrative that is coming out of Trinidad, that all those who supported Maduro seem to be some sort of extended arm of narco trafficking, is a very dangerous. I mean, I have political opposition to some of the former Caribbean politicians at different phases in my political sojourn, and nobody could convince me that these individuals were involved in any narco business. Nobody could convince me of that because it's just absolutely false.
Gentlemen, we have to wrap up at 8:30, which is 3 minutes away. Peter, I want to hear your parting words for the region. You've studied, you follow politics throughout the region and the world by extension. What is your focus politically for us here in the region and by extension the wider community as it relates to the politics, the economics and so forth with this incident? Because I know for a fact that there will be repercussions and they will be adverse. All right? Yeah. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, a couple of things, and I share Chester's confusion regarding what exactly tomorrow will hold, and frankly, I don't think that either of us really know, but we have to watch evolve, and I do share a lot of the concerns about not really fully understanding how this thing was possible in the first place, and we also haven't had a death toll from the Venezuelans, in terms of what military assets they lost or what personnel they lost or anything like that. But I'm thinking a couple of things. One is the possibility of elections in the Caribbean this year, and Barbados is likely to have an election shortly. My sense is that your leader, Dick Mitchell, is considering his electoral options, which would make perfect sense. And then also there's Dominica that may want to consider electoral options. My question is, how will that impact on their timing and whether they will feel it's useful to move towards elections and whatnot. And then the other thing is the extent to which leaders will feel constrained to move to the right. And earlier there was talk about what has happened in Antigua, where to be quite frank, I think that Prime Minister Brown and other prime ministers are being forced into a very, very uncomfortable position where they're basically being bullied to take positions that are unpopular, like the idea of the third-party deportations, and that worries me because the popularity of the left-leaning or South-supporting ideology in the region appears to be going out the window, and it's something that I struggle with. How does a person like Peter David, for example, in Grenada, how does he articulate his well-known left-leaning philosophy and his links to Venezuela? Does that automatically make him a non-starter in the politics of Grenada? That has been, quite frankly, a breath of fresh air in terms of times like these. All of this is the stuff I'm thinking about, and I'm very, very concerned about. And when I listen to Prime Minister Motley, who is always very strident, tiptoeing around the issue, it says to me that there is a discomfort with a progressive ideology that speaks and frontally confronts these kinds of issues. And on the other side, you have a person in the White House who has gone completely off the rails in terms of his determination to press an America First and a Trump-centered agenda, using all of the assets of the military in that regard. I am struggling to understand the phenomenal cost of this extraction, and whether the Americans can say, look, the millions of dollars or the billions of dollars we spent in taking out Maduro was worth it. And then, we have to get coming back. How are we going to get these funds coming back in terms of their future relations with Venezuela? So we're going to have more conversations like this, and I hope that I could be involved. Gentlemen, thanks so much for including me in the panel. I actually have my own conversation in radio in Barbados that starts in 30 minutes, so I need to prepare myself. But it's going to be a very, very interesting few weeks, and I hope that we continue to have conversations like these to keep the people of the region informed.
Well, definitely, Peter, as we say, thank you for your presence. This story is not going anywhere anytime soon, so we will be re-engaging you. You're part of the GBN, so all the best, and give Barbados my love. Chess parting.
Well, the parting words, I want to use the opportunity on behalf of the Grenada-Venezuela Friendship Association to condemn in the strongest possible terms the kidnap of President Maduro. In total violation of all the established principles of international law. The Friendship Association stand in solidarity with the people of Venezuela. We wish those who are still surviving well. As I say, we don't have a good understanding yet of what is happening, but we use this opportunity. We again call for reinforcing the principles of the Caribbean being a zone of peace. That is precisely what this was meant to avoid, right? It is still a very relevant principle upon which small states will have to rely, quoting Mia Motley, and a rules-based order, a return to some sort of rules-based order. That's the only opportunity available for us. I sympathize with those Cuban comrades who may have lost their lives in this encounter, and the Grenada-Venezuela Solidarity Committee sends its solidarity to the people of Venezuela and to all the Chavistas who no doubt will be hurt by these events.
All right, so once again, Chester Humphrey, I want to thank you for, on such a short call. It's only someone like you, I know I have to make an arrangement 3-4 weeks in advance.
No, but depending on the issue, if you call me, I'll come.
Just a call on Saturday, and it was here, and of course, Peter, always available. Thank you, gentlemen, and like I said, we here at the GBN, we are going to continue on that conversation until we get some clarification as to, where we're going and who's going where and what is happening and so forth. So this is an ongoing conversation, and again, thank you very much. Listeners and viewers, just want to remind you that coming up on To The Point this morning, we will continue the conversation. We have Dr. Ivla, I can't remember his name. From Guyana. Yes, he will be with us this morning.
He appeared on a program similar, talking about this very issue.
So he will be with us this morning.
Give him my regards when he comes,
yes,
please.
So definitely. And as I said, listeners and viewers, that's it for the conversation. We'll keep you abreast with what's happening in the region and beyond. That's the mantra of the GBN, as always. We take a break. We come back with great music after this.